Hi everyone, and welcome to the first episode of this 12-part series on the definitive guide to CAT. In this series, we are going to cover everything that you need to know when it comes to the common admission test and how to prepare for the test, what are the cutoffs, score versus percentile, what B schools you should be targeting, and the strategy elements of the whole preparation. So we're going to cover all of these things, and in the first episode, we are going to talk about the test. Now, this series is targeted towards students who are preparing for the CAT for the very first time, but even students who have taken it earlier will benefit from this series. So I hope you're going to watch the whole series with me. So let's get started. Now, in the first episode, we'll talk about CAT, and this is going to be the agenda. So firstly, we'll talk about what is CAT, and some of you, of course, might know a thing or two about CAT, but we'll talk about some of the details that you need to know. Secondly, we'll talk about the test pattern, how it has evolved over the last several years. We'll then talk about changes and trends from the previous years, and then we'll talk about who should take the test. So let's start, and the first thing that I'm going to talk about is going to be what is CAT. Now, a lot of students think that CAT is an aptitude test, so that is why it is common aptitude test, but that is not the case. It is common admission test, and it is conducted by the IIMs, the Indian Institute of Management, and every year there will be one IIM who will be responsible for conducting the test. Now, this test is conducted by the IIMs, and of course, the score is used by a lot of non-IIMs. So it's not that the score will be used only by the IIMs. And in this particular series, we'll be talking about institutes in a later episode. But for now, you should just know that it is the IIMs who are responsible for conducting the test. Now, every year it is conducted on the last Sunday of November. And this is a very good thing because then you know, okay, what is going to be the end point. So every year, last Sunday of November is sort of reserved for CAT. There are 3 slots in which the test is conducted. And in these 3 slots, the paper is different. So the questions that are set for the morning slot, the afternoon slot, and the evening slot, they are different from each other. But don't worry, they have a procedure through which they normalize the scores to ensure that the comparison is possible. Earlier, CAT used to be a single day, single paper test at a point of time. Then it became a test where it was conducted over a long duration, 20 days. But during that phase, they faced a lot of problems. Then they moved to a two slot paper wherein you would have a morning and an afternoon slot. And now in the current format, it is 3 slots. So you have a morning, afternoon, and an evening slot with different papers. Now the format is 120 minutes, so you have 2 hours to attempt the test, and for PWD candidates, you get extra time, and that is 1/3 of the duration. So 120, 1/3 of that is 40. So PWD candidates get 40 minutes additional, which is about 13.33 for each of the sections. That is the additional time that is given. Now there are the raw scores that you get, right? So when you take a test, you of course are used to seeing how many questions you attempted, how many you got right, then what is the score that you got. Of course, CAT also has that. So the correct questions that you get, they will deduct the negative marking that you get because that is there in the format of the test. And after that, the score that you get is what we refer to as the raw score that you have obtained. Now, do they use this raw score to calculate percentile? No, because as I mentioned, every paper is different. So it may happen that, say, in slot 1, the VRC section or the verbal section is difficult and the quant section is easier, whereas in slot 2, that equation has reversed. So to ensure that there is parity in terms of the comparison that is happening, what they do is they follow a statistical procedure, which is normalization. So they scale the scores, and that is how they use scale scores to then calculate the final percentile for each of the sections and then the overall percentile that you have obtained. So the raw scores are normalized to account for differences in the difficulty of the individual papers, the slot 1, slot 2, and slot 3, so that you have the comparable scaled scores. And the scaled scores are then used to calculate the final overall score and then the percentile, that is overall percentile. Now this is how the CAT scorecard looks. So CAT scorecard is going to contain a lot of your individual details. So if you look at this, it will have the contact details, the town, district, state, email, and all of those other data points, your application number, your PWD status, gender, category, date of birth, etc., and your test day photo and the uploaded photo. In one of the videos in this particular series, we'll be talking about the application form and what are the things that you need to keep in mind. But for now, this is how the scorecard looks. Now, in the scorecard, you will also see your individual sectional scaled score and the percentile. So, for example, for this student, you can see in VRC, the scaled score is 37.26. Now, clearly, when you take a test like CAT, which has a +3 -1 or a +3 -0 kind of marking scheme, which we will talk about, you are not going to have scores that will look like 37.26, right? So these are scaled scores, these are not raw scores, and they use these scaled scores to calculate individual sectional percentile. And then the addition of those scaled scores becomes the overall scaled score, and through that they calculate the overall percentile. Okay. Now, when you look at the CAT scorecard, as I mentioned, both sectional and overall percentile is given, which indicates how you have done relative to others. So some of the students may not know what percentile means. Percentile indicates what percentage of the population you are ahead of. So when I say I've scored a 90 percentile, it means that I have done better than 90% of the test taking population on that particular day in that particular test. Now, the CAT score is valid for 1 year. So when you look at the validity of the score, it is going to be 1 year, which means that if you take, let's say, CAT 26, it will be used for admission for the batch of 2027-29. So for MBA program starting 27, the CAT 26 score will be used. But there are, of course, certain programs where they accept scores from past CAT attempts as well. But these are typically you might see some of the 1-year MBA programs or some of the hybrid MBA programs accepting CAT scores of multiple years. But otherwise, CAT score has a validity of 1 year. So you can use it only for the next admission cycle. Don't confuse this with something called a deferred MBA option. There are very few BUI schools that give a deferred MBA option, but that means that you have secured an admit and then you're deferring your joining by 1 year. And in this particular case, we're talking about the validity of the score, and that is going to be 1 year, which is clearly mentioned on the scorecard as well. Now let's talk about the test pattern. And you have to really understand the test pattern because this is one thing that may or may not change next year when you take the test. We are going to discuss what happened last year, and in the last several years, the good thing is, of course, as I mentioned, it's a 3-slot paper. So you have the morning, afternoon, and the evening slot. The individual slots will have exact same pattern. So they are not going to have a different pattern for slot 1 and then a different pattern for slot 2. That is what will not happen. But of course, the fluctuations in difficulty will always happen. Okay. So the first section that you begin with in CAT or the common admission test is the VARC section. To put it very simply, this is nothing but the English section. So in this section, you're going to have 24 questions and you have 40 minutes to complete this. You cannot jump from this section to any other section without having completed the 40 minutes. So only after you complete 40 minutes, you move to the next section, which is the TLR section. Now in VRC section, the composition is 20 out of 24 questions, you have 16 questions of reading comprehension, which is the passages, and 8 questions of verbal ability. We'll see what each of these are as we progress. Then you have data interpretation and logical reasoning. This is nothing but your ability to think about a given problem in a very logical manner and answer questions based on what the data is. So 22 questions and 40 minutes. The 22 questions are presented in the form of 5 sets. There are 2 sets of 5 questions each, so 10 questions there, and 3 sets of 4 questions each, so 12 questions there. So 12 plus 10, 22 total questions is what you have in this section. Again, sectional time limit, so you cannot move to the next section unless the 40 minutes get over. And then finally, you have the QA section. Now in QA section, you have 22 questions in 40 minutes, and we'll be talking about syllabus in one of the future videos. So you'll get an idea of what exactly happens in each of these 3 sections. But for now, this is very simply the mathematics section. Now, some additional things that you need to know when it comes to CAT is that you're going to get an on-screen calculator. And for some of you, that might be a huge relief that in case you're somebody who doesn't like a lot of calculations, you're not great at mental mathematics. In that case, of course, calculator is going to help you. But please understand that you need to be reasonable when it comes to your calculation speed because there are a whole lot of other tests where that skill will be checked. So for CAT, you can obviously use the on-screen calculator that is present throughout. Second, one very good thing that they have now given is they give you an online Scribble pad as well. So on your screen, the test interface, you will be able to see a Scribble pad. You can write on it and erase the way some of you may have, of course, used Paint on your Windows. It's very similar to that. So you can write something, you can draw something on it, you can erase it, and all of that. You can change colors, the thickness of the marker, etc. So all of that you can play with. But of course, you also get a rough sheet, right? So you get a booklet In CAT, you don't get like individual sheets. They give you a booklet, and that is the only rough paper that you get. So you can use the booklet, and it is generally good enough for most of the students. So typically, it doesn't happen that you run out of space to do your rough work. So physical rough work can always be done on the rough pad that is given to you. But if you want to do it online, you can always use the Scribble pad that is given. And then physical rough sheet, as I mentioned. Now, the marking scheme for CAT, there are two types of questions. First is the multiple choice questions, which is MCQs. MCQs have a negative marking. So +3 for getting a question right and -1 for getting the question wrong. Now, there is another question type which some of you may be hearing for the very first time, which is called the TITA questions. Now, TITA questions are essentially type in the answer, wherein you are given a text box and you have to enter the response. For example, if I get the answer as, let's say, 3, I will have to enter the digit 3 using the on-screen keyboard in that particular text box. For these questions, there is no negative marking, and that is why the marking scheme there is +3 to get a question right. But if you get a question wrong, then there is no negative marking, so you get a 0. So that is why you have MCQs as well as TITA. And if you look at the composition of these questions, and this is from CAT 25, you look at the split of the MCQs and TITA in each of the sections, and you will see that there's a sizable number of questions that are actually TITA questions where there is no negative marking. And these questions obviously should be attempted, but also note that to attempt these questions, you will have to spend some time. So from a strategy perspective, it's not true that you should be attempting all of these, but whether you should just mark some of them randomly just like that, you should be doing that, but we'll cover that at a later point of time. For now, as you can see in VRC, there were 20 questions which are MCQs, and there were 4 TITA questions. Okay, when you look at DLR, the split was equal 11-11. So that made it a bit challenging as well. So CAT 25 had a pretty difficult or a challenging DLR as a section. And if you look at the QA, it is 14-8. Now, this particular distribution can change year on year. So don't believe that this will stay static. This will be exactly the same for CAT 26 or CAT 27. This distribution, they are known to changes because that is how they play with the difficulty. So if I want to make a particular section difficult, I might increase the number of TITA questions, because then I want to see how many people actually know it, rather than somebody getting, let's say, a particular question right, which is MCQ, just because they marked C and because of luck it turned out to be true. So if I want to do that, I can always do it, and that is how IIMs play with the difficulty of the test. Now let's talk a little bit about the evolution of CAT. And some of you may be wondering, why are we doing this, right? But you have to understand where CAT has come from. So the first thing is, CAT has evolved a lot when it comes to the format of the test, the difficulty of the test, and what it is assessing as well. For example, at a point of time, it used to have a lot of questions. There have been CAT, if you look at, say, CAT 2001, 2002, etc., which is a long time back. There used to be a lot of questions, 150 questions, 200 questions, and all of that. So at that point of time, it was largely a speed-based exam. Then they reduced the number of questions. They started reducing it, brought it down to 100, then 75 and 60 and so on. So they have played a lot with the format of the test. Now, currently, it is going to be a 2-hour test. So it's a 2-hour test, as I mentioned, conducted over 3 different slots in a day. But at a point of time, it used to be even OMR based. So you would have to circle those things. So whatever is your response, you have to darken that particular circle. And then it became online. So now it is completely online. You have to go to a test center and take it at the particular slot that is assigned to you. Now, CAT does not have a fixed official syllabus, and some of you may be surprised with this, that how come there is a test without an official syllabus, but that is what it is. They have never published a syllabus. So any of the IIMs have never mentioned that, okay, this is going to be the syllabus of the test. But when we look at the test, it hasn't done a lot of things randomly. So over the years, they have added and removed certain question types. For example, at a point of time, they used to ask questions which used to be related to spelling of the word. So what's the difference, for example, between the word stationary with A in it and a stationary with E in it? So confusing words. There used to be questions related to fact, inference, judgment. A lot of those question types have now completely vanished from CAT, and it has now, in the last 5-6 years, it has more or less stabilized to a certain kind of questions that they ask. And that is why when you look at like 10 years or 15 years of CAT history, you know what the syllabus is, because they haven't really gone out of that. So when we talk about the syllabus at a later point of time in this series, you will realize that there's no point doing a lot of arbitrary things because CAT is not arbitrary in terms of what they want to cover. So there's a limited scope, but of course they can experiment a lot with the tools that are available to them. So it's not done randomly. So though there is no syllabus, you will be able to prepare for it because of the years of data that we have when it comes to CAT. Now, who should take the test? And with this, I'm going to close this particular episode. When it comes to eligibility of the test, anybody can take it, provided there are some things. Firstly, you should be somebody who is planning to pursue your 2-year full-time MBA program. Now, there are certain 1-year MBA programs as well who accept the CAT score. But predominantly, when you look at the CAT aspirant pool, you will see that majority of them are taking it for the 2-year full-time MBA programs. In fact, for some of the PhD programs as well, CAT score is accepted. So there could be some students doing that. There are a lot of these hybrid blended postgraduate programs for which CAT score is accepted. So, but that proportion is going to be very, very marginal. So most of the students, I would say more than 95% of the students who are taking the CAT are full-time 2-year MBA program aspirants. Now, as I mentioned, the executive part-time MBA program will also accept the CAT score, but those numbers are not going to be very significant. Now, to take the CAT, you need to fulfill this particular eligibility criteria. First is that you need to have completed a bachelor's degree with the required percentage. Now, what is the percentage? If you're a general EWS or NCOBC candidate, the requirement is 50%. Now, if you're somebody who is SC, ST or PWD, then minimum 45%. So if you are somebody who has not already graduated, but you are in the final year and this particular requirement is being satisfied, you will still be able to take the CAT. And in fact, that is the best time to take the CAT for the very first time, which is when you are in the final year of graduation, because that first of all gives you ample time to prepare as well while you are studying, and it gives you early exposure to CAT. So even if you decide to do your MBA at a later point of time, at least because you've taken the CAT in the final year of graduation, you have experience. So that always helps. Now, let's say if you don't have a bachelor's degree, but you haven't completed your bachelor's degree, but you're in the final year, as I mentioned, you will be able to take it. The second thing is if you have completed a professional degree, which is CS, CS, ICWA from CMA, fellow of the Institute of Actuaries of India with the required percentage. So if you, let's say, you have completed a particular professional degree, you have completed your CA, you will be able to take the test. In the final year of bachelor's degree, so if you are not completed but you are in the final year, then you will be able to, but again, the requirement that you see here has to be met. So when you appear for the test, right, you have to indicate that the graduation score that you obtained so far, because when you fill the CAT form, you have to enter marks that you obtained as on a certain date. So whatever semesters you have appeared for, you have to enter that. And if you enter a figure which is less than 50%, if you're a general EWS NCOBC, it will not allow you to continue. So that is why if you're somebody who is currently in the pre-final year, or you're in the first year watching this video, the most important thing is to take care of the eligibility, which is to ensure that you get the minimum requirement that is there. And obviously, the higher it is, the better, so that you are eligible to take the CAT when you're in the final year of graduation. Now, if you already graduated, there's nothing that you can do. Whatever percentage you have obtained, of course, as long as it is more than 50, you're eligible if you belong to this category. If you belong to this, then it is minimum 45%. So that was the eligibility. All right. Now, what we're going to do for this particular video, we're going to end it here, where we have discussed what the CAT is. In the next video and the next set of videos, we'll be talking about a lot of things, starting from the syllabus, the score versus percentile, what are the B schools, and so on and so forth. So stay tuned, and I hope this particular video has helped you. Wish all of you all the best, and I'll see you soon in the next episode. Bye. Take care.